A big thank you to White Rabbit for bringing this video to all of you via Patreon. Okay, let's try again up against Nicol Bolas the Ravager this time. Lots of small creatures and lands this time, so should be able to do much better. We'll see if the Grixis player scoops to a turn 1 Cavern of Souls, and then it can be the Vicious Conquistador, obviously making a token with every vampire we cast, and then it's a turn 1 Mana Vault from our opponent. Path of Ancestry is a tap land. I don't think we particularly care about getting the Null Priest into play, so we can play that out. And then we'll go for the Insolent Neonate. Discard a card, sacrifice it to draw a card. Our opponent has 10 more life in this room, so they are at an advantage over us, being a control player. Just holding up blue mana would worry about a counterspell, but obviously don't need to here. Let's not fix our opponent's black mana. We can go for the Zealot first of all. Scry an unclaimed territory to the bottom, and then we get to lose a life and draw when the Dusk Legion Zealot enters play, and that is Drana. That's a really good one. Missing haste at the moment, unfortunately, but not to worry. Go in at our opponent again. They lose a life to the Vicious Conquistador, and then lose 4 life in combat. And they decide to scoop to that, so yeah, not particularly interesting game so far, but I'll try and get one for you. Alright, third time's a charm we hope, up against Turgrid, God of Fright this time. And we have 2 mana... some 2 mana stuff to play, so we'll risk that one. Of course not. Well, we've just gone up against Nicol Bolas the Ravager, so I'm not sure if this is the same player or not. We have a turn 1 Thoughtseize. Fire Covenant might not be too useful, but we've got creatures to play, so we'll keep that. And I want to aggro my opponent as soon as I can, so it might be that they get a Soul Ring or a Mana Vault into play straight away that we could have had them discard, but I think the aggro plan is pretty important. Alright, and they just go for a tap land, so Cavern of Souls against the Nicol Bolas player again is pretty lucky. So we'll get out Martyr of Dusk. This one makes a vampire with lifelink when it dies, and then we've got free reign to go for that Thoughtseize next turn. And then if we get a land in the meantime, we can go for the Sanctum Seeker and hopefully start piling damage onto our opponent. Might be able to get a board wipe out of their hand here, and we do get a land for the Sanctum Seeker. So we'll go Thoughtseize, have a look at their hand. And they decide to counterspell the Thoughtseize, alright, so they're not going to be countering our Sanctum Seeker at least. Let's just throw down the Isolated Chapel and we'll have to swing in and pass at that. Might have Toxic Deluge or a board wipe or something like I said, but we'll pile on as much damage as we can between now and then. That is a Trinket Mage, and it was Sol Ring that they went for. Luckily for us, they had to tap out here. So during our upkeep, that is a Stormkirk Captain, might actually be better than the Sanctum Seeker. It makes the blocks more difficult for them, and I'd rather not lose the Vicious Conquistador. So let's get out the Stormkirk Captain. That is +1/+1 and first strike on our vamps. Play out a land. And now we can turn in sideways and not lose any creatures. Blocking the most power, so taking 6. Going down to 24. And that just means that we've got more creatures to turn in sideways with this as well, so that will be an extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 damage to them next turn. Then it is a Scry from Temple of Epiphany. Obviously played the Sol Ring here. Can't tell, but I'm sure the Cavern of Souls is really saving us here. So now we get to turn in sideways with that in play. It will put a bunch of triggers on the stack, including the Vicious Conquistadors. Extra load of damage knocks them down to 17. And then they go down to 4, so it's not quite enough to take them out. We just have to hope that we dodge another board wipe. I assume if they had one, then they would have gone for it before now. But didn't top deck into it, so there we go. Aggroing out the control player. Let's try one more. Couple of tribal decks this time, going toe-to-toe with Sliver Overlord. And not the best hand, but I'll keep it. It's not so bad that I think I have to get rid of it. And we are on the play. So we'll go for the Command Tower to start things off. And then it can be this Insolent Neonate. Already seen that once this video. Unfortunately for us, our opponent gets into a Striking Sliver, which has first strike, probably one of the worst slivers that we could have seen on turn 1. So why don't we get down, we'll shock down the Godless Shrine, and we'll go for the Bloodghast here. Our opponent holding us at bay this turn, but what we can do next turn is go for the Stormkirk Condemned, and offer up an Anthem to them, so they probably won't block. And we can always get rid of their slivers with the Zealous Persecution. If they get another 1 toughness sliver into play here, I will actually go for the Zealous Persecution next turn, I think. Although maybe it's worth setting up with the Condemned first. Anyway, they go for 3 visits. and bringing their Shockland into play tapped. Inquisition of Kozilek, so in that case, let's go for the Mana Confluence. We'll have a look at their hand with the Inquisition of Kozilek. Oh, just a bunch of lands, that's really good. So we get rid of another Sliver, which would have gone down to the Zealous Persecution anyway. So now we've got time for another Vampire. Now they shouldn't block, but we'll see what happens. None of our creatures are going to have 1 toughness, if the Condemned has anything to say about it. Yeah, I think we just keep our tokens so that we can keep pressure on our opponent. We'll get rid of a land. That gets rid of the Striking Sliver, ready for next turn, and it deals a bunch more damage to our opponent. So now they just have to limp out the Sliver Overlord, really. Not sure if we can outrace them in all honesty. Either that or manage to get into another Sliver or a Demonic Tutor. And that's a pretty good top deck from our opponent, so it might be that they get into a board wipe. So our opponent's got Wooburg next turn, but it's likely that we're going to be seeing a board wipe, so let's just go for the Zealous Persecution this turn, I think. That is +1 to all of our creatures, and then -1 to all our opponents. Could have gone for another buff there with the Stromkirk Condemned by discarding this, but it would have only knocked our opponent down to 12, and this is where it's relevant in an aggro list that our opponent has an extra 10 life. Alright, Buried Alive did not go for a board wipe, curiously. Went for Basal Sliver, a Dregscape Sliver, and the Gemhide Sliver, so I was playing around the fact that they had a board wipe, which is probably what they should have gone for. So maybe should have held on to the Zealous Persecution, because could have had rid of the Virulent Sliver here. We'll go for the Quagmire Vampires with Multi-Kicker, and then we can continue to threaten our opponent. They're letting this through, so that is 4, 8 and 10. We can have them down to 2 here, so let's do that. Does leave us empty-handed, but we're just trying to dodge a board wipe and go wide on our opponent now anyway. Not worthy that it switches off the Insolent Neonate as well, because we can't discard a card that we don't have. So there's the Dregscape Sliver. Can we go wide on them next turn, unearthing a bunch of creatures? I don't think they can do poison to us. Maybe they can just combo off instead with something. Oh, do they have haste on all of their creatures thanks to the unearth? Yeah, they're just tapping down their creatures for mana and sacrificing them. Yeah, didn't go for the board wipe because they had a combo. Haven't actually seen this Sliver combo before, so I'm glad that we've seen that. Don't mind going out this way as much as our opponent just wiping the board and then slowly winning while we can't do anything. That is the plight of aggro lists. But like I said, if our opponent was at 30 life, like you usually are in a 1v1, then we definitely would have had them there. It's just that we can't get games in the 1v1 room at the moment. So I'll just fast forward it here, or if our opponent takes too long, I'll just assume that they've got an infinite combo and that they can get out all of their slivers. Okay, I was answering YouTube commenters there and just looked up and saw that my opponent scooped, so I'm not sure if they goofed up on their combo or if they actually just didn't have a combo. Managed to get themselves into the Cloud Shredder Sliver at some point, but wasn't enough, or they just goofed up the combo, not sure which. Anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this revisit to 1v1 Edgar Markov. Don't forget, Edgar Markov is still banned in 1v1. I'm just running this in the multiplayer room, that's why I'm allowed to play it in here. But if you're thinking that Edgar Markov has been unbanned from 1v1, he hasn't. Deck list in the description as always. Don't forget to leave it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the latest content and support the channel as well. I'm tribalkai on the EDH channel. Thank you for watching.